I'd like to welcome all of you to the Legal Issues for Food-Based Businesses webinar. This is done in partnership with CVOEO and the Vermont Small Business Law Center. Next slide, please. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. I'm going to keep the recording on throughout so that this video can have a second life on YouTube after this presentation. We ask you to please mute yourself when you're not speaking, and to enter questions into the chat, or whenever we come to a question break. After the workshop, you will receive an email with the contact information that we are about to present, as well as links to other resources mentioned and a copy of this presentation. So without further ado, I will pass it over to my colleague, Simeon Geico.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad you could make it today. I'm really excited to learn more about this topic. I just would like to mention a few quick notes about our program in case it's of interest to anyone. The Micro Business Development Program is a statewide program that helps low to moderate income Vermonters to start or expand a business. There's no cost for our services for those that meet our income eligibility guidelines. And so we provide what's called technical assistance or business counseling. Also, in addition to our business counseling services, which are one-on-one, we also conduct classes like this throughout the year on a variety of different topics. If you are in the Chittenden, Franklin, Grand Isle, or Addison County area and you're interested in connecting with our program to learn if you qualify and meet with a counselor, you've got my contact information and my coworker John Gergley's information there if you'd like to follow up with us. Next slide. Just a quick thank you to some of our partners. The People's Trust Company in St. Albans, the business development advisor there is Jay Cummings, and People's Trust Company offers a variety of commercial and business and banking products and services, as well as business consulting services to help their clients. And they also offer classes throughout the year as well. So if you're interested in learning more about People's Trust and connecting with them, I encourage you to visit their website as well as connect with Jay Cummings. Next slide, please. Thank you to our other partners as well. These are the Greater Industrial Corporations of Lake Champlain, which covers the islands, the Burlington one Greater Business, GBIC, the Franklin Industrial Corporation, and the Addison County Industrial Corporation. Next slide. So I mentioned before that the Micro Business Development Program is a statewide program. Here are the regional contacts for other micro businesses that cover the other counties within the state. We've got Brock covering Bennington and Rutland with their contact information, Capstone Community Action covering Washington, Lamoille, East and West Orange counties. I mentioned CVOEO already, NECA covering the Northeast Kingdom, including Caledonia, Essex, and Orleans counties, and finally SEVCA in the southern part of the state covering Windham and Windsor. So this information will be provided to you when Sophia emails everyone this information after the presentation today. And for our primary statewide website, we've got mbdp.org, which is yet another way of identifying who the counselors are that are in your area, should you wish to take that route. Next. I always like to mention that there are other wonderful business development services in our area. We've got the Burlington Business and Workforce Development Department. We've got the Center for Women in Enterprise, Mercy Connections Women's Small Business Program, the Vermont Small Business Development Center, the Small Business Administration, SBA, which is a federal one, and finally, Champlain Valley SCORE. I think they've just changed their name to SCORE Vermont, if I'm not mistaken. So there's great connections there. If you don't qualify for our programs or you would like to connect with these programs, we encourage you to do so, so you can tap into the strengths of these programs and get the help that you need. Next slide, please.
All right. I think that's me.
That's you. Thank you, Nicole.
Okay.
Take it away.
Thanks, Simeon.
Thanks.
All right. So I'm Nicole Kaloran. I'm the director of the Vermont Small Business Law Center. We are housed at Vermont Law and Graduate School. And as a result, I get to work with some pretty fabulous students, one of whom is Christina Williams, who is going to largely be driving the presentation today. Christina has been doing the research and the prep for this, and she is ready to tell you guys all about food-based businesses and the legal issues that you might encounter if you're developing a food-based business. You can see we've got our agenda. We're going to look at the key legal issues. We'll talk about both state and federal regulations that food-based businesses need to be aware of. and we'll offer some resources for continued learning. We'll also at the end, we'll have just a slide that covers some of the basic topics that pretty much every single small business that we've worked with needs to hear about and learn about. And we will take questions throughout. We would like this to be an interactive conversation. You guys are all here for a reason, probably because you have specific questions related to this topic. We would love to hear your questions, and we will have some interactive portions that invite your questions as well. So for now, though, I'm going to hand it over to Christina Williams. Take it away, Christina. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm going to start this with a Mentimeter. Hold on a second. No, Christina, wait. We're going to do this first. I'm going to have you guys do this. I'm going to pull up this. What do you do for your business? This is a tool called Mentimeter. If you go to menti.com, you can add that code up at the top, or you can just grab the QR code. We invite all participants to do this, and you can see some live results as it comes in. So we'll pause for a second for that.
And Nicole, if somebody hasn't started their business yet and they're interested in starting, should they answer that way if it relates?
Great point. Of course. Yeah, I should have made that a little broader. So what do you do for your business, or what do you want to do for your business? Let's do that.
Nicole, I don't see the quick poll yet. Should I be seeing that?
Do you see the Mentimeter window?
I do not.
You do not. I'm so sorry. I thought that I had switched over to that. So let me take care of that. I will switch the share. I thought I was being clever here. Hold on just a second. I'm so sorry, guys. Okay. We're gonna go like this. Okay. You have it now?
Yes.
Okay. There we go. No wonder there's nothing coming in.
So it says, what do you do for business? But in there is a oh, I'm blank.
Maybe this is where I was giving the explanation. If you go to menti.com and put that number in at the top, or you scan that QR code, you'll get to it.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I did not intend for this to be a confusing exercise, but here we are. Gonna get through this. Gonna be okay, and I trust we're gonna learn some things here. There we go. That's what okay. Fresh fruit drinks. Ooh. What do I do for business? I own. I am an owner. That's good. Baked goods, sandwiches, bakery, packaged goods. Ooh. I'm assuming that means that, so the folks that the person who started at the AG's office as the small business advocate, does that mean that Emily departed?
Yes, I'm Izzy. Nice to meet everyone.
Hi, Izzy.
Small business
Welcome.
advocate at the Consumer Assistance Program.
Love it. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
We will miss Emily, but welcome.
Yes, I just read her profile. We keep a profile of former employees, which is like so great and telling of the Consumer Assistance Program.
Right.
But she's doing something with like crafts, like leading an organization who connects crafters to like make more, expand their business. So go Emily, my predecessor, but happy to help anyone as a small business advocate in the Attorney General's office.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Izzy. That's wonderful. So yeah, you guys you're all over the place, but I can see there's quite a bit of prepared foods, folks, here. There's some home food preparation. There's takeout. There's farmers markets. This is really good. Haven't started yet. Would love to host supper clubs. That's interesting. I don't know if we've actually talked to someone who's done something like that before. Food truck, art truck combo. Oh, cool. Travel to local cities, selling photography and food. That's awesome. I love this. Part of the reason I love this job is because we get to talk to so many interesting people. Okay, that's a good one. So the next one is, what questions do you want us to answer in this discussion? How can we be helpful to you today? You guys can see this?
Yes.
Yes, I don't see a QR code with this, if that's
I can pull it up again. It's the same one. You just go on to the next question.
gotcha.
Mm. Write these down.
I'm excited. It looks like we're going to be like right on topic.
I think so. Okay, this is awesome. Requirements to know before selling at events outside of brick and mortar. Expanding from home. Afraid missing something in my business I should know about, some law rule that we hear that a lot. It's just like, what do I not know that I need to know? Regulations around food storage and packaging good. Non-table service dine-in options. Okay, informal seating. Requirements for home business. Outdoor pop. Okay, cool. You can see somebody has some similar questions as well. Okay, I'm going to hand it back over to you officially now. Let me get this slideshow back up, Christina, and we can resume. Are you seeing the slideshow now?
Yes.
Okay, let me cycle forward and I will be advancing the slides for you. Please take it away, Christina.
All right. So before we jump into specific licenses and rules, I think it's really important to ask a foundational question of who regulates your business, your food business. And this may seem super simple, but many food businesses, entrepreneurs get tripped up in who they should go to. But in reality, different regulators are going to cover different food activities. And so it's really going to depend on three different factors: what you're making, where you're making it, and how you're selling it. So this is kind of going to be just a cheat sheet for figuring out who your primary regulator is for your business model. And I'm going to just walk through each of these. So the first row is restaurant, food truck, pop-ups. So the primary regulator there is going to be the Vermont Department of Health, retail food service. And so an example of that would be a taco truck at a farmer's market. So if you're making food and serving it in real time, like a cafe, pop-up diner, food truck, VDH is going to be the regulator there. And so you'll need a retail food service license, and that will be subject to health inspections, and we'll get into that further. The second one, packaged food for resale. So the primary regulator, again, is going to be VDH, but under a manufactured food establishment license. And this could be anything from like bottled hot sauces or granola or jams, anything of that nature. So if your food is prepped, packaged, and then sold at a later time, whether it's on the shelf or online via reseller, you'll fall under manufactured food rules. The next one you'll see is cottage foods. So this primary regulator is going to be VDH, but on home-based exemptions. So this is going to be Act 42, and we'll get into that later. But this is basically like home baked cookies, what you're selling directly. And these are going to be small scale, shelf stable foods. Obviously, they're going to be made at home and under certain income limits. So it's going to be between 10 and 30K annually, and you have to register, label, and meet certain safety requirements. But you don't need a commercial kitchen. And so this is going to be like the ideal place for folks who are starting out. And then you may cross a line if you get a lot of business and then you cross that threshold of the 30K annually. And then the last line, we have meat, poultry, eggs. So primary regulator here is going to be the USDA, Food Safety and Inspection Service. That's what FSIS is. And so the example here we have are jerky, sausage, eggs. And meat and poultry are handled at a federal level and not by the state. So if you're reducing something that is more than a certain percentage of raw or cooked meat, you'll fall under the FSIS rules. And so those rules are going to be stricter, often requiring certain inspections that are going to be on site, different plans, temperatures, all of these big details. And so really it's going to depend on what your business is doing. So just going back to those first 3 points I mentioned earlier. So like what you're making, where you're making it, and how you're selling it. Those are going to be the key 3 things of how you figure out who is regulating your food business. And we can go on to the next slide. So Vermont licensing options. So let's dive into what the food-based business structures are going to be like. So understanding these distinctions early can save you time, save you money, and a lot of headache, frustration, which we see come through the clinic all the time. So whether you're cooking or at home or manufacturing for retail, there's going to be specific licenses that apply to your business. And so the first one, retail food service license. This is a license you'll need if you're serving food directly to customers for immediate consumption. And so obviously that includes restaurants, caterers, pop-ups, food trucks, anything of that nature. So even if your business is temporary, like a once a month, I think someone said dinner club. So something of that nature too would fall into this category if you're serving food to people in real time. So that's going to be the key there. You'll likely need this license from VDH. And it also applies to mobile food vendors, and in many cases, pop-up events hosted in other people's spaces. What matters isn't how big or frequent the operation is, but it's just the fact that the food is being sold to the public right there. And with this license, you're going to be asked to submit an application, which will have different things detailed in it. I believe some of it's going to be like specific plans, floor plans, and then a food safety inspection will also come with that. The VDH website is very, very good. And so that's going to be one of the resources that we point to at the end. And it goes through all the different licensing that you will need and things that require permits. Some things require permits for like water sources and waste disposal. And so VDH is really great at like telling you exactly what you need to do. And I think the whole state of Vermont is really great when it comes to regulatory things and telling you, this is the office to contact and here are their phone numbers. And they just make it very, very easy for you to do that. The next one's going to be manufactured food establishment license. So this is if you're not serving food to be eaten on the spot, but making it for someone to take later. So this requires businesses that prepare food for resale, I think someone mentioned farmers market, so that's would be in that space. Vermont expects you to utilize a commercial kitchen, but in some ways or some places, there are approved kitchens that you can use. Shared use kitchens are a thing, but it's going to be based on inspection at that point. It's important to note that you can't simply work out of your home kitchen for most of the things that will go into um most of the things that will go into whatever it is that you're making, unless you qualify under a specific exemption. And so that's going to bring us into home-based exemptions with Act 42. And this is newer to Vermont food businesses. So Act 42 was designed to make it easier for small home-based food businesses to start out safely and legally. And so it creates two categories of exemption. The first one's going to be food processors who make shelf stable goods. So I think we mentioned earlier cookies, candy, spice mixes, things of that nature, can earn up to 10K in annual revenue without a full license. And then cottage food producers who sell more widely or who have a bigger income can go up to 30K per year. And so these exemptions are only for non-TCS foods. And what does that mean? It means foods that don't require temperature control for safety. So no dairy-based dips, no refrigerated baked goods, basically anything that's perishable are gonna not work for this. So you'll still have to go ahead and do food safety trainings. You'll still have to have proper labeling, uh, and then a register online. Those are going to be the key things with them, but there are exemptions with Act 42 that will come in handy for you. So it's not exactly a free pass, but it does open the door for you to go out there and explore your business idea and see the clientele for it. Let's move on to the next slide.
Chris, Christina, this is Simeon. How do you want to take questions? It looks like there's a question in the chat. Do you want to hold or do you want to, as you go?
We can bring them in as they are.
Okay, great.
Please
Well,
do.
Yeah, do you want me to help? I've had a hard time putting that into words succinctly. So the question is basically if I'm a vendor and I have the license to be a pop-up vendor, meaning that I produce my product on site at the farmer's market. I'm making I do drinks, so I'm making a fruit drink on site. So I'm licensed for that. I'm cool with that. But if you bring up the point of the cookie, if I wanted to make a cookie in my house and I applied for and received that Act 42 exemption, and I bring the cookie to my beverage stand, can I sell, was it $10,000 or $30,000 of cookies before I need to get a commercial kitchen, or is it the combined total of all of my sales now that I've added the home-based component to my portfolio?
How does that work, Christina?
That's a great question. I think it is going to be based off of your business, so it would be together.
All combined total. Okay, understood.
Combined total.
Thank you for that clarification. It may seem odd, but that's a pretty important distinction for me. So
Yeah.
thank you.
No, it is important. And I think it's like, even if there's some way to divvy it and say, well, only, 30,000 for direct sales of cookies, it's probably better to assume that it applies to the home business, the whole business, just for purposes of permitting. If there's
Gotcha.
any sort of question, usually this is just the suggestion we give anybody who's facing a potential regulatory issue like that. If they're walking that margin, it's best to get the permit. It really is just best to get the permit. Although if the income is not going to be enough to justify the cost of the permit, then that's a little bit different. I did want to do another poll just to see if you guys have filed with the Secretary of State. And let me go back to that. This is our last one. Can everybody see the Mentimeter that asks if you filed?
Yes. Sounds like all of you can come visit us at the clinic.
We would love to see you.
Christina, I don't know if you mentioned it, but just to clarify, the acronym VDH, I'm assuming that is Vermont Department of Health, correct?
Yes.
You may not know that. Okay, thanks.
Got it. That's probably what we're going to get for participants. That's good though. So this is pretty common. We see a lot of people who come in who are what we call sole proprietors who have not done anything with the Secretary of State. And you can be sole proprietor and also file an assumed name or DBA. That's just saying that an individual is doing business under a different name or businesses. It's interesting. And we have one person that they've set up an LLC. Pardon me. That's great. Okay, I'm going to go back now. I think it goes back to you, Christina.
Yes,
we
limit
go.
your liability with an LLC.
Yes.
So let's do a federal overview. So now that we've talked about Vermont licensing, we can kind of take a higher look out. I think it went back to the Mentimeter, Nicole. There we go. And so if you're only selling at a local farmer's market, for example, you might think the FDA or the USDA doesn't apply to you. But the moment you scale up, so, you know, you cross state lines, you ship online, things of that nature, you're going to enter a different kind of regulatory space. And so the FDA facility registration requires any facility that manufactures, that processes, packs, or holds food for consumption. It needs to be registered with them. So this is going to be definitely things that are larger, wholesale. So I don't think anyone specifically said that, but I'm thinking of maple. You know, maple is sold across, you know, state lines. So even if you are a small co-packing operation, and you want to go through like Etsy or Amazon, you may need to register. And so the FDA's focus is going to be solely on food safety. And so this registration just allows them to go in and inspect, and see if there's anything that they need to take action on. They're going to look at the facility and all of those things. So you'll need to provide contact information, what your facility type is, and there'll be a whole slew of details as well with that. You'll be issued a registration number, and then it'll be renewed. It'll be renewed, I believe, every even numbered year. That's kind of an odd thing, but that's how that FDA facility registration works. So next is going to be the qualified facility attestation. So if you're a super, super small business, you might be eligible for a reduced compliance burden under a qualified facility. And so I think you'll see this actually a lot in Vermont throughout different regulatory bodies, that if you are under a certain threshold, there'll be a reduced compliance burden. So, but again, this is federal. So the FSMA, Food Safety Modernization Act, shifted how the US handles food safety, and it moved it more towards a space of preventative controls. And so if your average revenue is below a certain threshold, which I believe is pretty high, I think it's $1 million. You can file a qualified facility attestation, and so this means that you can be exempt from certain requirements, and it just lowers the threshold of compliance that you need to reach, which can be super helpful. And then the last section, or we have two sections left, the preventative controls. And so for those that are not exempt, this is going to get into the details. So if you're producing, packaging, or storing food for human consumption, you're going to have to follow some kind of set of rules. So it's going to be identifying hazards that could affect your food, monitoring the controls, the preventative controls that you have. And then if there's any issues, you know, your ability to correct those issues, and then documenting everything. So in this section, there's going to be a really big emphasis on what you are doing, like your plans and your procedures, and how you're documenting absolutely everything. And so it's all for the sake of preventative issues. The last one is going to be the USDA FSIS. I mentioned it a little bit earlier. But again, this is going to be specifically over meat, poultry, and eggs. And then this is going to be a secondary like food safety and inspection service. So you might go through multiple of these. But this is actually going to be pretty strict, and it's going to involve inspections on a continuous basis. And even somebody who is like a small meat processor, they're going to need the USDA to come out there and check out their facility. If you're selling something like processed eggs, like a liquid egg whites or something of that nature, it is going to be a little bit trickier. If you're doing just fresh shell eggs, it would just be the state of Vermont. So there are those two distinctions. And so it really just depends on what the specifics of what your business is trying to do. And that's going to be the same throughout everything that we look at, really. It's just going to be, what is your business doing, and what are the specifics that I need to follow for my business? Let's move to the next slide.
We've got two questions actually that I'm
Okay.
going to jump in here with rather. Pardon me. Are there any extra requirements for having an option on the business website for folks to order food for pickup? Pardon me. And do any of these regulations require an acronym plan? Simeon offered an HACCP plan. I don't know what that is. What is that? Do you know what that is?
So from my understanding,
what is it?
HACCP plan.
Passive? What did you say?
H.
I'm missing something. Can you type that into the text to the thing for me, Simeon? I'm sorry.
No problem. Okay. Just give me a second, Christine, if you want
No
to
problem.
go that in.
Oh, I was just going to say, so the big distinction is going to be whether or not someone is eating in real time at your space, right? So that's going to be the big distinction on whether or not you fit into which category there. Makes sense.
So packaged foods then would be packaged foods in general, whether they're purchased on a website for pickup or purchased in person but prepackaged, that would be treated as the same.
Yeah.
Okay. The trick though is that if it's an out-of-state customer ordering off of a website, that might be different. If the customer has to cross state lines,
Yeah,
there might be some federal regulations that are implicated there.
which is an
HACCP.
interesting space for where we're at, because we go over to New Hampshire quite often.
Okay. Sorry, do any of these regulations require a HACCP? Okay, HACCP is what you were saying, a hazard analysis critical control point principle, or hazard analysis critical control point. ServSafe associated HACCP plan is a specific food safety management system. I don't know if you addressed that at all, Christina.
So yeah, I think it's going to depend on how big your business is, what the scale of your business is, what the income of your business is. So I believe it's like if you reach over that certain threshold, then you will, but they're not going to require you to do the super specific detailed compliance in regard to like preventative controls if you are under the threshold of what you're making every year.
Okay.
So it could come out to, you're starting off not doing that, and then maybe later on in a few years you get to that threshold, and then you have to provide a few more things, which would be that.
I also just did a quick search in terms of when it's required, so I'll just pop that in the
Go ahead
here in case it's of interest.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Whoa, my goodness, what just happened? That was fun, wasn't it? Okay, hold on a second.
Should be labeling.
Yeah, there we go.
Labeling
Okay.
essentials.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so this this is going to be a big thing. So let's shift over to labeling. So if you're packaging food for sale, whether it's cookies, hot sauce, I don't know, kombucha, the law requires you to label your products properly. And what you put on the label, it does matter as much as, the product inside. And so, a key thing to note is that good labeling does three things. It helps the consumer make an informed decision. It helps regulators track safety and accountability. And then the third thing, it protects you as a business in the event of a problem like a recall or an allergen issue. And allergies are a big, big, big thing. And so just looking at that first one, required elements on food labels. This is primarily going to be overseen by the FDA, and they apply to nearly every single food packaging, whether it's across state lines or whether it's a small scale. They're likely to follow the guidelines just to avoid any legal issues and to build consumer trust. So every food label must include a product name, the quantity. So usually that's like expressed in, like ounces or grams or something of that nature. An ingredient list, and then an allergen statement. So I think the most critical piece is going to be the allergen statement. And there are 9 major allergens. Some are like peanuts, wheat, soy, things of that nature. I'm sure you've heard of them. And even in trace amounts, I've seen often on home bakeries, they say like, this may contain, or this was produced in a facility or a kitchen that, um, you know, also creates this that had this allergy in it. So this was cooked in a kitchen where peanuts were in usage, even though this doesn't have peanuts in it. It's important to say those things. It's also going to need to have on the label the business name and the address. So that's going to be the contact information that you have for yourself, or for your business, whatever that may be. There are different claims that are listed here: gluten-free, organic, made in the USA. And so these are kind of where your legal issues may run. Gluten-free, to use this label, the product has to meet, FDA standards, which means 20 parts per million, fewer than 20 parts per million of gluten. So just know that if you are using certain claims like gluten-free, like there are standards that fit to what that means. So you can't just label something gluten-free or organic without understanding what that requires, because you could face some legal issues with that. An optional feature that you can put on a label, this is Best Buy, or use Best Buy or use by date. Obviously you can put your business like media handles and things of that nature on there. Might be helpful for you at a later date. Just getting those customers back. Let's go ahead and move to the Vermont specific labeling. I think we went back. Okay. So now that we've gone over the federal labeling, we'll go back to the state. And so if your business uses local branding, or if you're working, I think I mentioned this already, but maple products, this is going to be for you. So while the federal, the FDA and the USDA handle, the national standards, Vermont has its own specific laws and how you represent your products, and the ingredients or the origins of these products. And this matters because Vermont as a brand, it carries a lot of weight. And so consumers basically look at Vermont and they're like, whatever I get from Vermont is going to be super high quality, or it's going to be local. It's going to be a small batch product. And so the state has made certain rules to protect that reputation. So it's kind of cool. Vermont kind of comes with its own branding, so it's good to note, but we have to make sure we're utilizing the products and keeping that reputation. So, for example, Vermont maple products or 100% must be Vermont made. So if you're labeling something as a Vermont maple product, the law is super strict. So there is ingredients that you have to fit into, like certain percentages. You can't blend syrup from other states. It's very, very specific. And then the phrase produced in Vermont, this one is kind of interesting. You can't just say produced in Vermont because your business is located there. And there is a Vermont statute to legally use produced in Vermont on your label. It has to have the majority of the production has to be in Vermont, not just the packaging. And this includes anything from, cooking, whether it's being fermented in Vermont, roasted, whatever it is that you're doing. Majority of that process has to be done in Vermont. And I don't know, I think some people might think that's strange, but it really does protect the reputation, so everything has to be, majority of it has to be done here in the state. And then lastly, Vermont labeling resources. So the good news, Vermont provides excellent resources to help you figure out everything that you have to do. So the Vermont Agency of Ag, Food, and Markets, it has, the clear definitions for labeling terms. It has different checklists and templates that you can utilize for different food products. So depending on what you're making, you can go on their website and find it and just follow the rules that they have. And additionally, if you're selling at a farmer's market or through the Vermont Food Venture Center, there's likely going to be some sort of checklist that specific location requires of you in order to meet the compliance of that market. So it's important, I guess, just to remember to make sure everything that you're labeling is accurate to your knowledge and then accurate to the statute. Let's see if we can move on to the next slide. Great. So sales, venues, and compliance considerations. So I'm gonna jump right into farmers markets. So when we look at farmers markets, you'll usually need local permitting and often a temporary food service license. And so again, that's gonna come from VDH, the Vermont Department of Health, and this depends on what you're selling. So if you're sampling food, you're going to, like, if you're sampling food, having people come and like try different things, you're going to fall under retail food services. And so there's going to be certain requirements that you're going to have to follow there. So things like sanitation, different refrigeration options, hand washing requirements. And then you'll have to also look at vendor agreements. Again, and that's going to be specifically with the farmers market itself. So there will be rules and liability that they likely have paired when you go and sign up to participate at the farmers market. When it comes up to pop-ups and community events, I like to do pop-ups and like to go and check out different pop-ups. I'm a coffee advocate, and so I like to go check out those. But these are typically just temporary retail food operations. And so if you're operating for just one night, maybe in a kitchen or some kind of restaurant that's just like not yours, you're just going there for the evening, you're still going to have to comply with local health permits, temporary event rules, and things of that nature. So, different sanitation and food handling uh, regulations will also apply. And then wholesale and co-packing. So if you are thinking about scaling up or going through retail stores, um, you will need a super clear written agreement um, that spells out, who's responsible for what. So labeling, packaging, think about like the storage and delivery, and then things like a recall, right? Like who's going to be responsible or liable in that case. And so it needs to be written out super clearly in those agreements. Highly suggest a lawyer look at that for you. And then lastly, e-commerce and online, selling through your own website, selling through Etsy, selling through Shopify or Instagram, TikTok, still are going to potentially trigger FDA rules. So again, the shelf stability, any allergens, and then the shipping practices are going to be a different thing for perishables. So again, you'll need to comply with labeling, proper labeling, different packaging rules, and making sure that you're fitting into whether or not, I guess it's called tamper evident packaging. So whether or not your packaging, fits that kind of standard. Um, the sales tax rules are going to be different as well if you're crossing state lines. It's important to take note of that. Maybe speak to your accountant. And then let's go on to the next slide. I think we can talk about kitchens for a second. Yep, kitchens and inspections. So Vermont actually has strict regulations where commercial food production can occur. And so you're going to want to make sure that you're choosing the correct setup. So if you're manufacturing food for wholesale, you want to use a licensed facility. And so this can be something known as like a shared kitchen, or your own commercial space. If you're producing something that's low risk, your home kitchen can be used, but it still has to meet certain requirements. We want to make sure everything is clean, organized, and in a compliant space. So once you've secured your production space, you're going to want to look at your layout and your hygiene. That's definitely going to be key. There's going to be different protocols that you have to have in regard to hand washing. Even if you've worked at a place like McDonald's or Starbucks, like you see, they have those different signage for you to wash your hands after you've stepped out from behind the kitchen. Nicole, I think we went away.
Sorry, I opened up a window so I could research the question that Melissa just asked, which is that she talked to the VDH, said that she could do a pop-up event once a month without having to have a food service permit, and also told that if she's not selling the food but offering it for free, that she does not need a permit. I'm guessing, Melissa, that free part is the key. If something is offered for commercial sales, then there's a liability tied to the person who's offering it. If it's offered for free, then there's not those same ties. But what do you say, Christina?
Yeah, I would say that I think everything's really tied into, what income your business is taking in. And I think you see that I think that's going to be key. There's different thresholds, if your business is bringing in X amount of money, then you have to do this. If it's bringing in a higher amount, then you have to do this second tier. So that would make sense to me.
Yeah, and I'm going to research that exception, Melissa, just to confirm it. I know that also what Christina had said is that there may be local requirements that require a permit. So zoning actually factors in here. So that means talking to the town and seeing if there's a requirement to have a permit for a temporary event in a town in a particular area. Usually if there's a food service establishment and they have zoning approved, they're probably going to fall under that. But if it's a different establishment, it's always good to check with zoning just to see if there's a local permit needed, especially in the big cities like Burlington. Burlington has very, very specific requirements for any sort of pop-up events or vendors, street vendors, anybody who's doing something, a temporary event. Burlington usually likes to know about it. But I'll look for the answer to that specific question for the 1 month exemption. And go ahead, Christina.
Yeah, if we can go to the next slide. I think we're gonna, yep, perfect. So Vermont has this thing called meals and room/meals tax. And this is going to apply if you serve prepared foods for immediate consumption. You provide food as part of a service like catering, and then you host pop-ups where there are tickets that include food. So the current tax rate for that is 9%, and it's going to be your responsibility as a business to go ahead and register that with the Department of Taxes, and then collect that tax at the point of sale. It's kind of really tricky if you forget. So it's important to just remember that those different things up front. And so when you get into understanding, your taxes, and the returns that you're going to file, making sure that you have that that little section of that little 9% that is being taken out.
We've
Insurance.
got another question in here too that I'm going to ask, which is good. How about takeout food? And my understanding from what you've said, Christine, is that falls under the food service retail establishment, that's going to be just prepared food that's served real time.
Yeah. Yes, yes, yes.
And I'm going to put a link in here too. I did find, Melissa, you're right. There is an exception for once a month. And I'm sending the FAQ from the Vermont Department of Health for food and lodging program, temporary food service establishment. I want to sell food at a few events, but not very often. How do I know if I need a license? You need a license if you sell prepared food more than 1 day per month. Good to know. Cool. Go ahead, Christina.
No, that's great. That's great. Insurance, general and product liability. So it's going to be important that you have the correct insurance coverage. This is something that's not optional. You want to protect, your business, your assets, and you want to make sure your business is running as long as you want to. And so as a food business, you want to carry, the most food businesses carry general liability insurance. So it just covers your essentials, if you operate at a farmer's market, pop-up or festival, things of that nature. Product liability insurance. And this is something that protects you if someone claims they were harmed by consuming your product. So again, I mentioned allergies earlier, so that's going to be a big one. So if there's an allergen exposure, or a packaging injury, if your product is sold through e-commerce or different retailers, they usually will require that you have a proof of product liability insurance before they even will take on your item. So it's just important to remember those things. And then a recall plan. So this is required under FSMA 117, 139. So if you manufacture food under the FDA regulations, even as a small business, you're going to be required to have a written recall plan. And it's outlined under FSMA's preventive controls. So I mentioned this a bit earlier, and they give you a step-by-step of what your plan should include. So things of like how you're going to identify what the affected products were, how you're going to notify customers and retail partners, how you'll recover and dispose of the products, and how you're going to correct the root cause of that. And so even if your business is small, it's, highly important to, consider creating a recall plan. And it could be something as simple as, you are having a home bakery and then a supplier that you use sent you contaminated flour. And so how would you go about doing something like that, or fixing something like that? Or you discover that the printer that you used didn't correctly label an allergen. And so just considering things of that nature, it's going to extremely benefit you. I am a person who is highly um, wanting to always just making sure that all of the risks are understood and what processes need to happen. So I definitely would say that it is of benefit to you as a small business to consider the risk and create different plans, especially a recall plan. And Nicole, I believe the next slide is yours.
Awesome. I get to fill in everything else. Oh, what do you see as the biggest risk in your business? I'm sorry, I forgot that we had these Mentimeter things in here, guys. I want to hear what you guys have to say about this, because I know usually the people who are running the business are the people who actually know where the risk is. And so I've got this question. I just want to hear in general from the audience, what do you think is the riskiest thing you're doing in your business, or what is the biggest thing that's gonna be risky? Incorrect licensing. Parking lot. All right, that's it. Nobody else sees any risk. Oh, wait a second. Selling meat and perishable products. I figured you guys probably see some risk. Weather and a site visit. Okay, meat and perishable products from a food truck, right? Clarify something for me, Christina. It's like meat that's not incorporated into a packaged food, right? Like meat, just meat itself, meat, poultry, and eggs are the ones that are governed by federal regulations.
Mm-hmm.
So meat that's prepared and put into another product is not governed by those same regulations. So only if the meat, poultry, or the food, the eggs are being sold directly. That was my understanding.
Yeah, that is how it's read.
Yeah. Okay, these are all good concerns. Good. And there was also the question from before, which was, what do I not know that I should know? My fears I'm missing something in my business I should know about. Okay, so what I've got here. All right, where did my slide go? Here we go. What I've got here, these are the most common topics that people come to us about. We run an educational program. We talk to a couple hundred people a year about the questions that they have for their small business and their nonprofit. This is what they ask us about for the most part. And so I'm going to run through briefly just with a couple of points to make sure that everybody, like everything else except for this food specific stuff. If you're running a small business, this is the things you really should be thinking about. The first one is going to be, if there's any risk in the business, and there is risk in the business when it comes to selling food, protecting against that risk, putting a protective layer between the owner and the business. And that means usually filing with the Secretary of State. So we had that poll that said that most of you are sole proprietors, those who answered. One of you was incorporated as an LLC. What happens when one files with the Secretary of State and files an LLC, and also when one then treats the LLC as a separate entity, a separate person that has its own transactions and its own business to deal with, that puts a layer of liability protection in between the owner and the business's activities. And that means that the owner's stuff, their home, their bank account, their personal assets are protected when something goes wrong with the business. So having a business entity, an LLC, usually you can have a corporation as well. There's different requirements for each. Basic thing to protect against liability, have a business entity. And also, if one is running an LLC, have an operating agreement. This is an agreement, a written document that shows that that the owner and the business are not the same person, that they are agreeing to run the business together, and that this is how it's going to happen. Who comes in, who comes out, how does the money get handled? That is what goes into an LLC operating agreement, the equivalent for corporations bylaws. That's a critical document to have to say this business is being governed and it's got its own bucket of work, and the owner is over here and protected from the business activities. Again, any risk, if customer is going to get an allergic reaction, if they're going to have a bad reaction to food that was not properly cooked, that liability comes back on the person who made and sold that food. So having a business entity, very, very important. Having an operating agreement if you are an LLC. Next one is protecting intellectual property. That may not be as applicable to food-based businesses, but it still applies. There's branding and copyright. So trademark and copyright is the ones that I'm thinking about. Trademark is the idea that if one is doing business in a geographic area under a certain name or with a certain label or logo, and the public comes to associate that product with that name or logo, then that creates a trademark for that business. They can actually put a TM in parentheses at the end of their name or their logo that indicates that they are claiming that they use that name or logo in commerce. They can also file that with the federal government to create additional protections. And if somebody infringes on that trademark, if somebody tries to do a copycat operation, if they filed with the federal government, they have more protections and they can file suit and get damages. Copyright's similar. Copyright, the thing that I would think most applies is going to be labels, decorative labels, maybe menus for those of you who are running a restaurant, that sort of stuff. The moment that something with creative expression is put into a tangible medium, such as being recorded or put onto paper or on a canvas, that becomes copyrighted. It becomes a piece of work that the person who created it owns the copyright. Doesn't need to be filed with the federal government. It can be to add additional protections for that. So mind the intellectual property. Know what it is. If there's menus, if there's creative work, make sure that is being, it doesn't have to be registered, but it can be registered. Just know that if anybody else tries to copy without permission, and especially for commercial purposes, the work that somebody has produced, that might be a breach, an infringement on their IP rights. Contracts are an incredibly critical requirement. Very important for any small business. Understanding contracts, understanding what they say, reading them, understanding what the requirements are going to be, and understanding what protections are given under the contract. That's critical for small business. Not just reading them though, negotiating your contracts, making sure that if you are working with a vendor and the vendor does not have some sort of protective clause in the agreement that says that if something goes wrong on the vendor's side, that you, the buyer, is not going to have any lawsuit that comes down and costs you money. Same thing for, I see this as well at events, especially pop-up events. There needs to be some idea where there's some risk in an activity, like serving food, that is distributed, and it should be clear who is going to handle the risk. So, for an example, somebody serving at a farmer's market, they likely will have to have their own protection in place, their own insurance in place in the event that something happens with a customer. They have an allergic reaction or something like that. But they're also at an event where people might be wandering around drinking, for example, and maybe somebody gets hurt or they fall into their cart, or anyways, other things can happen as well. It's those other things that need to be protected against. And so in vendor agreements, especially with event agreements, the things that other people other than the food being produced might do to cause damages, those have to be protected against. It's called an indemnification clause usually, or hold harmless clause. It says who is responsible for what if something terrible happens. So having contracts, reading them, negotiating them, very important. Having insurance. There's been a couple people who distinguish between having brick and mortar or having pop-up events or farmers market stuff. There's a couple different kinds of liability insurance. There's general liability insurance that applies to brick and mortar. Usually that's going to be the parking lot concerns, the falling ice and things like that. That's the slip and falls inside the store or in the restaurant. There's also going to be that might be one of the only ones that applies to food service operators, but there's going to be, what I want you to take away from this is this. There's going to be specialized insurance policies that apply to food-based businesses, and the best person that you can talk to about that is going to be a realtor for insurance. They will talk your ear off. They'll try to sell you a lot of policies, but they will tell you where the risks are in a particular kind of business that sells the products that you do. So if there's going to be insurance necessary, take it with a grain of salt, talk to an insurance agent, see what they have to say, what's risky in what I'm doing, and what should I protect against, what insurance policy do I need. Also, important to reduce risk by doing all of the things that Christina has talked about to make sure that everyone is in compliance. They have the appropriate permits. They put the appropriate labels on the products. They're taking steps to make sure the customers are aware of what's in them, that they're paying attention to the allergens and everything like that. That reduces the risk for the business. Following compliance steps is intended to make sure that the business is safe from compliance action. That's why the rules are there. Minding employees, that's challenging. Usually going to have employees for food-based businesses. Just know that the 3 points that are important to know are hiring, firing, and promotion. That's 1 point, actually. That's a point of transition. Someone coming in, someone being fired or being promoted to a different position. That's a point where we have discrimination claims. And so what's important there is to make sure that the employer has documentation of the performance of the employee, the failed performance or the problematic performance for the employee, and the basis by which they're being fired or promoted. Also important in the hiring process to not ask any personal questions at all of applicants, to simply speak to them about their qualifications for the job, and to not ask two things. Can never ask on an application for someone to check the box in terms of criminal history, and you cannot ask somebody what they're being paid. Can't ask their current salary. So that can come out in an interview, but those are tricky points with negotiating with employees where businesses tend to get discrimination claims. The other two, classification and benefits. Classification means if the employee is classified properly, they're being paid properly. If they're classified properly, they might need to be paid overtime. Pay attention to that. And then benefits. There's a number of benefits that kick in with just having one employee. If one is a sole proprietor and operating by oneself, there's no benefits, but having one employee means workers' compensation insurance, unemployment insurance. It means there must be a paid leave system and paid leave provided to the employee. And it also means that they have to receive the Fair Labor Standards, that they have to receive the minimum wage and overtime. So employees can complicate things. They also require payment, and they also require quarterly tax payments and everything like that. Just know that there's legal issues there. The final one, this is not a legal issue. This is just something that I highly encourage everybody to do. Hire and work with a lawyer. We can help you with that if you're interested. It is really, really a good idea to have an established relationship with an attorney, to have someone who is already familiar with your business, with what you do, to help you with the basic steps to get started, to look at vendor agreements, look at stuff like that. We happen to be able to offer 10 free hours to anybody who comes through our program. So if you'd like to take advantage of that, we've got a slide with that information in a bit. But having a lawyer for your business, period, very, very important. They can offer perspective. They can offer sometimes business advice. Sometimes they can be helpful there, but they can help you spot the issues that you need to be worried about. So for our attendee who said they just want to know what they don't know, lawyers will tell you what you don't know, and they will help you identify what risks are in the future that you can prepare for, and that you don't get hit by those. Highly encourage you to hire and work with a lawyer. And there's lots of interesting things to do with working with lawyers. There's billing, there's fee agreements, there's things like that. There's specifics, but they are one of my favorite phrases from my colleague, Jeannie Ikes, is that lawyers are sharks, but they're your shark when you hire them. So they're good for your business. That is it. That's the basics. And that's the substance. We've got some resources that we'll have a resource list as well that comes out after this. Do you have anything else you want to add, Christina?
I think there was a question when you started. I don't know if we already answered it, but it was if you are selling deli meat in sandwiches that you are making in your house, do you have to be regulated by a federal level? And I would say the answer to that is no. I think you have to look at it as, the meat that you are utilizing already has been USDA inspected. So if you can think about it that way, like you are already using something that is USDA inspected, and now you're making sandwiches out of that already and then selling it to somebody else. So you're not in charge of how that meat was processed. So you're going to stay under the state retail food rules. Yeah.
So essentially, and I think we hit this already, but Adrienne, if someone is producing just meat, just poultry, just eggs, not putting those into products, then it's regulated at the federal level. Everything else is going to be state. I think we addressed pretty much all the questions here, but I'm going to pause here and see if any of our attendees have any additional questions to pose. We are here and we'd love to hear them. Timmy, I know you have some. You've always got great questions.
Well, actually, they've been answered along the way, and I've been just popping in different resources as they've been talked about or as they've occurred to me.
Thank you so much. That is so helpful.
Of course.
And we'll get those into a list too and share it as a document. Yeah, go ahead, Blake.
Thank you. So one of my questions, I said it in one of the surveys, is in terms of not being a sit-down restaurant, one question I have is, do you all know the fine line of what people are allowed to do in your establishment if they can sit, like, almost call it like casually, but there's no tables? Because I always remember that over the years working in restaurants, like there is something about like they're not, it's almost like BYOB. It's like you chose to stay here and eat your food. We didn't provide a table and service and all that stuff.
Right. I don't know, Christina, what do you say? I have a thought. Are there any restrictions on how they're, like, where people are sitting or eating? Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was saying that you can go, you could answer,
Oh.
but you were gonna say. Sorry.
I will have to research that question, to be honest with you. I'm not aware of any differentiation. But that said, there's going to be basic requirements for having a food service establishment, period. And so that's going to be in the regulations that say what the operations must be, what facilities must be provided. That is going to be where the answer is. But think about the somebody who's selling prepared food at a farmer's market. There's no seating. They're wandering around. They're taking the risk of eating it sitting on the sidewalk or whatever it is, or on the bench. Same sort of idea in my mind.
Yeah.
However food is being consumed, the point is that there is food being consumed real time that is prepared. And if it's being prepared real time and served to be eaten, even takeout, then it applies as a retail food service establishment. And that's gonna, the thing I don't know though is that I don't think there's any requirements for seating under that, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think it may be, if you do put out tables and seating, that could be an issue.
I want to look that up though. So let me write it down, and I will in our resource list, I'll see if I can find something that's responsive to that, Blake.
Yep.
That'd be great. Thank you. And I know something to do with bathrooms, like in the past, I remember, like, it's, if you're providing seating, you have to provide a bathroom for people to use. Whereas, like, some delis and stuff, you'll see like there's no public restroom, but then every seated spot does.
I'll figure that out.
And then kind of piggybacked on that is also about alcohol. And I know, like, I'm sure the Department of Health could answer that first one, and maybe Department of Liquor Control could answer the second one. Is selling alcohol retail is different than people being able to consume on site, but where that BYOB line is, I'm curious if anyone knows anything about.
I do not.
I looked this up a couple of years ago, actually, because somebody had a question of when it was pandemic times, had a question if they could do like low to non-alcoholic mocktails. Wow. There is a threshold under state law. I believe it's like 2.5% alcohol by volume. That anything under 2.5%, anything under that threshold, I'm not going to say what the number is. I might be wrong on it. Under that threshold, it's possible for it to be just sold as just as a piece of food that's a packaged food. Above that threshold, there might need to be special labeling applied to it. I know that any business that is selling alcohol should be in contact with, I think the department, who handles the alcohol permitting? There's going to be a state level and there's going to be state and a local approval, as far as I understand. There's only a certain number of liquor licenses that are handed out locally.
Right. I know there's the Department of Liquor Control just for having a license to sell.
Right. It's liquor control, right? Yeah. But that's going to be at both a town zoning and a state question to look at.
And then my last one, I think I had a couple more, but I forget them. So the last one is, someone mentioned to me something about how if your business, so if my restaurant is just me and my partner, even if my kids who are very young, I know there's rules about like when it's just family, in not just how you operate, but even like tips. Do you know anything about the laws when it's just family, opposed to as soon as you have that first non-family employee?
There is no distinction between family and non-family when it comes to employees. So if somebody is working as an employee, even if they're a family member, then they must be treated as an employee. They are given full benefits and they are entitled to minimum wage. There are some exceptions to child labor on farms. Those are the exceptions. But in terms of just a regular business, anybody who is working for that business and receiving a wage, they are considered to be an employee, regardless of their family status. If they're not receiving a wage, they're considered to be a volunteer. There's different restrictions there.
So in a sense, if there was a loophole, it's that, for example, my partner who will not be full-time at the business, but every time she comes in to help, if she wasn't paying a wage and was just helping, I mean, I guess
Right.
a friend could do that too, or a stranger even, but that.
Right. And anyone who's coming in and they're not being paid a wage, they're considered to be a volunteer. And I don't have the restrictions for volunteers on hand right now, but that's something to look further into. It sounds like you've got a lot of good questions that we could help you with, Blake, with some additional research. You might consider signing up for a full educational consult with us.
Yeah, I would love to. I'm hoping for that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. There was another one, Melissa. You got some good questions, Melissa. Is there a resource for recommendations for opening a food shelf unrelated to the Vermont? I do not know the answer to that question. Do you have any idea, Christina?
I wonder actually if CAFs might have something on that.
If CAFs might, yeah, good point, right?
I think they might.
Can you add that to your list for after the
Yeah.
consult? And also add the resource that's responsive to the question on tables and seating for retail food establishment. We'll try to find some stuff that's helpful for you. If you guys want, you can use the QR code here. This is a Small Business Law Center, and you can see the services that we provide. We don't charge for the educational consult. We give up to 10 free hours with an attorney. We'll find an attorney for you. We would love to get you to someone to get all of these questions answered specifically and to get some helpful documents in place for you. There's the QR code if you want to look us up, and it's there too. So I think that's the end, unless anybody has any other questions. All right.
Well, Christina and Nicole, I'd like to thank you for your time today and sharing an overview of this topic. I know there's a lot to it, and there's probably nuances that people have questions about that relate to them. And it sounds like connecting with your program would be a great start for that. And thank you for providing the way to do that. I think, Sophia, you're also going to be providing